Hi, and welcome to Be More Now. My name is Blake Moore, and tonight I'm talking with Harrison Goldberg, musician, poet, artist, and South Coast legend. We'll be discussing Harrison's long, interesting, creative career as a jazz saxophonist, poet, artist, and playwright. Harrison is a man of many hats and stories, as you're about to discover. I'm going to start us off with one of his songs. So I'm going to let that play in the background. And that is Rhapsody by Pacific Woods, which is Harrison Goldberg sitting right here with me in the studio at Point Arena High School. And before I bring him up, I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Goldberg, the amazing Harrison. Some of you in Gualala, he's a resident and a very familiar face along the Mendonoma coast. And with his trademark tools of musical expression, his 3 saxophones, tenor, alto, and soprano, Harrison can be seen and heard in several local venues, as well as on a variety of CD recordings. He changes these 3 instruments as easily as one might change hats, which brings something to mind. As the grandson of a Russian immigrant hat maker in New Bedford, Massachusetts, Harrison has worn a few hats of his own making, including that of an abstract artist in the Dadaist tradition, a wine label designer, a writer of music education workshops, and a mentor for young musicians. He has his share of awards for his visual art pieces, which have found their way into some corporate and private collections worldwide. Harrison is an alumnus of the famed Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts, and has been playing saxophone professionally since the age of 17. And he also is a percussionist, which he doesn't mention in this bio, but I've witnessed you with your rainmakers and your shakers, and we have collaborated with Poetry and Jazz. He kind of put poetry and jazz on the map for us here in Point Arena as one of our earliest collaborators. And so easy and so wonderful to have you here, Harrison Goldberg. Welcome to the studio.
Well, thank you, Blake. I'm honored. I'm pleased and I'm honored that you asked me to be on the show. And you're very right about these hand percussion instruments. There was a point. I'll tell you a little story if you don't mind. I was performing. I'll tell you where the idea for including hand percussion became kind of an obsession with me. I was playing on a cruise ship for Carnival Cruise Lines, and we stopped in the Dominican Republic. It was the first time a ship had ever visited Samana. It's one of those one of those little villages in the Dominican Republic with dirt streets. And this was the maiden voyage of a cruise ship coming into a place that you might see in a National Geographic magazine. And their main source of income, they made broomsticks, the people.
Okay.
So they would carry these huge bundles of thatch on their heads. Broomsticks.
For the base of the broom.
Yes. So anyway, I happened to have a day off the day we were in Samana. And I had a bunch of percussion instruments with me in a backpack. And I decided to go hiking out into the bush while I was there and explore the countryside and to see what kind of, maybe I'd hear some music. So I threw a shaker, some claves, and a bunch of things into my backpack. And I went out into the bush, and not 500 feet from where I entered the bush, the jungle, I heard people playing percussion instruments and drums and chanting and all kinds of wonderful things. And I emerged out of this thicket to find myself in the middle of this drum circle, the only white guy in the middle of a drum circle. And instead of I was just totally excited.
Of course you were.
And I thought, I don't have my saxophone with me. I'll pull out these instruments. So I immediately began jamming with them.
Yeah.
And it was just fantastic. And the leader of the group said, "Hey, I want to bring you down to the school where the children were having a classroom thing. I want the kids to hear you." So these musicians and I traipsed down to the school, which was near a lagoon. And we went in, and the teacher, I was introduced to the students, and everybody brought out instruments, and we all went outside and started jamming. And then they said, "Hey, let's go for a swim." So they took me down to the lagoon, and we took off our clothes. We all went in swimming. So it was kind of like music. Music was a great communicator for me. And it was a different scene than being on the cruise ship playing for well-heeled tourists on the cruise ship. This gave me a chance to see the balance,
right?
The haves and the have-nots, and how happy these people were with the simplicity of their lives. Making music with with garbage can lids and all kinds of things that they found.
Right.
And it put things into perspective for me when I was on board. When I went back to playing the next night, I started thinking about it. And then on a subsequent trip to Jamaica, I happened to have a day off. So I went into the marketplace and I met a woman who made percussion instruments. And I said, "I would like to have could you make me a Jamaican percussion instrument?" And what I would like a shaker that functions as a scraper, as a shaker, and as a drum.
Uh-huh.
So I could shake it, it would have seeds in it. I could scrape it, and I could beat on the top of it like a drum. So she said, "Well, come back in an hour and I'll have an instrument for you." So I came back in an hour, and there was this fantastic cylindrical instrument that might have been about 2.5 to 3 feet long.
Uh-huh.
And that night on the cruise ship, when I wasn't playing my horn, backing up the quartet I was in, I pulled this thing out and I started shaking it and scraping it. And I felt more connected to humanity with these instruments than just playing on the cruise ship in a tuxedo, to these people who spent a lot of money to go on a cruise ship. To me, that gave me the excitement of the immediacy of music and where it came from, the simplicity of it.
Well, that so fits you because, my earliest recollection of co-creating with you was the poetry and jazz. And you showed up with this bag, not just your horns, but this bag full of other stuff. And horn's a lead instrument, as is voice. So poetry, and it's its own sort of a dance. And you had such a good feeling for when to play and when not to play, when to be subtle. But when you weren't playing, you had this, like you said, that immediacy, this stuff that represents the earth and the rhythm and this other feeling, and you could just make different sounds to add all of this texture. And I remember, there probably were like 30 things in your bag, and they were all around you and you could just do a little bit with this. And that was something that gave me a kind of confidence in my willingness to express with other sound besides my voice or things that I knew, because I watched you do it so effortlessly and with such kind of grace, and it worked. I was like, oh wow. And it was permission. It feels like you gave permission for sound to be complex and simple at the same time.
I think that's a very good point. And I understand that you played a very interesting instrument.
The theremin?
Yes.
I love the theremin.
Tell me about the theremin and how you got, independent of what I inspired you from, obviously. How did the theremin, I'm turning the tables on you in this interview.
Well, yeah, you are. I was just talking to you about your coast career,
Yeah.
your coast music career.
Yeah.
I think the theremin for me, because it was a dancer's instrument and I love weird sound. I definitely have that. I hear sometimes when people have seen me dance, and I actually had a really great compliment from a group of Japanese musicians in San Francisco. It was at the Boom Boom Room, and I was dancing, and they were so weird and math, and everyone's standing around like shaking their heads, and I was the only one dancing, and I'm in there, and we were having this communication, and I'm dancing with them, and afterwards the lead singer comes to me, in his Japanese with English, and I lived in Japan for a few years, so I could kind of understand, but we had this interesting communication. But he basically said, I was doing like 14 nines and I'm doing this crazy rhythm, and how were you were following us. Like, I've never seen anyone be able to dance in that sort of a thing. And I think that theremin for me has a music within the music that sometimes is what I hear, which is why some of those weird rhythms speak to me. We have a band coming to the theater on the 15th of March called the Polyrhythmics, and they're out of Seattle. And that band is one of those bands that I listen to. They have many, many albums, and I like listening to them because every time I listen, I hear a different texture, a new thing, a new sound. And I think that's what the theremin. I play the theremin like a rhythmic instrument. I don't play it like, a classical opera singer. I play it for texture and a feeling, and I have all these weird effects pedals and things that I do with it that make it a lot of fun. And then I just recently got something called a theramini, which is like the toy version of the theremin, and I haven't decided what I think of it. It's interesting because you can play. It's got perfect pitch, so you can put in the chord what you need, but it's also not as sophisticated. So it's like a toy, but it makes cool sounds. So thank you for asking. It's
Great.
A dancer's instrument.
Well, I thought of what became of the instrument that I had made in Jamaica is a fascinating story, and I'll just wrap up with that. That particular instrument that I had made ended up in Ghana, Africa.
Okay.
And, how it ended up in Ghana is a crazy story. I was performing at the Cardozo Hotel in South Miami Beach. When I left the cruise ship, because I didn't have enough seniority to continue going on cruises, I ended up getting a gig down in the Art Deco district down in South Miami Beach. And I was part of the Miami Design Preservation League that was trying to preserve those hotels before the developers knocked them down.
And they did.
And we were able to keep,
a lot of them.
We were able to win and prevent them from doing that. But anyway, I was part of the magic of mime, the magic of mime and music. It was, I met a couple of mimes, and you would have loved this, Blake, because I know you didn't know this about me. You've been involved in mime troupes and that whole thing.
Yeah, but those aren't mime. Those are speaking mimes. Those aren't painted mimes. Those are mimes with voices.
This was a couple, and there was a wonderful weekend in Miami where all the different performers would go out on street corners and play, and I was given a street corner to play my saxophone, almost like busking. I would be on this corner, and on the opposite corner were this mime couple, and they were, unbeknownst to me in the beginning, they were miming to what I was playing. I didn't realize it. And I looked over to them, and we developed this kind of synergy back and forth. So about a month later, they came to me and said, we enjoyed working with you, and we're putting on a production at the Victor Hotel in Miami Beach. We're going to do the magic of mime and music. We're putting on this, and we have 17 minutes left, and we need someone to come up with a script for 17 minutes. So I said, well, I have this musical allegory that I've been creating I had just begun creating it using music symbols and terms from the language of music theory. So I showed him my treatment, and they said, this is great. Why don't you score this to music? And so I met this Brazilian guy who had a collection of authentic Brazilian music, and we took that music that he had, and we put that music in with the story that I'd written, and we did this show. We did the show at the Victor Hotel. So in the audience, unbeknownst to me, was a group from Ghana, the Otomankoma Kayarima Cultural Troupe. They were a cultural powerhouse Ghana music troupe, percussionists. They had a 15-year-old master percussionist. I mean, this young man was amazing. So anyway, they were in the audience. So after the show, I had a gig. I had to run in the costume. I had a big, long beard, and it was glued to my face, and I couldn't get it off my face. For some reason, the glue was like, it stuck to my own
your own facial hair, yeah.
My own facial hair, and I couldn't get it off. And I was wearing a long tunic, so I kind of looked like Moses. And I had long hair. It was another wig, and that was attached to my head. So I had to go and play the gig on the porch of the Cardozo Hotel, dressed like Moses. And people were walking by while I was playing. Anyway, in the audience was this young 15-year-old master drummer from this group from Ghana. And I saw him immediately because I'd heard their performance first before they came to my show.
Right.
I'd heard their whole thing. And I took a break and I approached this young man and I said, hey, how would you like to sit in? Because we had a vibraphone player. I was playing tenor, and we had a jazz guitar player. We didn't have anybody playing percussion. So this young man went and got some drums from, close by. And
because it is Miami Beach after all.
Miami Beach. And anyway, he joined us, and we were doing all kinds of jazz standards, and it was just unbelievable. He was like a young Elvin Jones, the polyrhythms and the whole thing. He made us sound extraordinary.
Yeah.
So at the end of the performance, I thought, you know what? I got to give this kid a gift. And I gave him the drum that came from Jamaica, from the market in Jamaica, that was probably created by Africans from the African diaspora, from that genealogy.
Yeah.
And it was going back to Africa with him, going back to Ghana.
Was he excited by it?
He couldn't believe, the graciousness and the gift that he was getting. And I told him that it was, I told him I had it made for me in a marketplace in Jamaica. So it actually went home. It went back to Africa.
That's a beautiful story.
So I kind of conjecture, right? I kind of conjecture whatever happened to that drum. It's kind of like the red violin. What was the life history of that drum?
That could be a children's story.
And Blake, we also know that when the blacks came over here, they were denied the use of their drums because the white
uprising. They were afraid that they would
slave
gather
owners
together.
thought the drums were going to help to foment a rebellion. So
it kind of did.
To me,
for all of us,
doing that, sending that back to Africa with this young man who was a master percussionist, who will be a mentor to other young percussionists. I thought to myself, that's one way of making things right in a kind of existential way.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about your coastal career, how you got here, Berklee School of Music? Like, what's your story? Did the cruise ship leave you at the Point Arena Wharf? Is that what happened?
No. Well,
Fort Bragg.
Anyway,
Did you escape? I want to take just one moment to remind you that you're listening to Be More Now. I'm your host, Blake Moore, and I'm speaking with South Coast saxophonist, poet, amazing jazz musician, and all-around fabulous artist, Harrison Goldberg.
I was a student at Berklee when I was 30 years old.
Okay.
I'd been in the Army. I was drafted out of a community college. I had gone to a community college for 2 years, and in the interim, I was drafted. And when I got out of the Army, and I'll just, I'll bring you up to
I
present.
figure you will.
When I get out of the Army, I worked for 10 years. I had a variety of jobs because I was in the Army, and I didn't go to Vietnam. However, the whole experience of being drafted and the whole political climate and everything left me kind of disillusioned. And I didn't want to be in an office. I didn't want to be at a desk job.
Right.
I wanted to be outside working with my hands and my body, and I wanted to, be in the fresh air. So I got a job in my hometown of New Bedford, Massachusetts, as a longshoreman.
Okay.
I was unloading ships that came from all over the world with different kinds of products, from Brazil, from Iceland, from Japan. And I worked for 3 years as unloading ships. Of course, that was a lot. I was 30 years old. I was pumping iron all the time. I was muscular. I was in vigorous health, which is a far cry from the listener can't see me now, but hey, listen, it goes with it goes with the turf, with the aging turf.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a good memory. Anyway, I ended up meeting a guitar player when I was unloading ships who would come down to work one day on the ships. They would pay you that day. You'd come in for one day and unload a ship, and then they'd pay you right after the ship was unloaded. And this guy needed the money, and he heard I was a saxophone player. So he sought me out, and he said that the next day he's going to Sonoma, Southeastern Mass University to enroll in some adult education classes. And he said that I should go with him. And I said, well, I'm through with college and everything. I went to, I did 2 years, and I'm kind of trying other things. He said, look, you're going to like it. There's a big emphasis on music over there. And this young man was an amazing classical guitarist, flamenco and everything. So I said, okay, I'll go with you. And I enrolled in 3 classes: creative writing, jazz improvisation, and what was the other one? Creative writing and big band. They had a jazz big band. And they were all taught by African-American teachers.
Uh-huh.
And as the course turned out, I was inspired, and I just was like a flower in bloom. It opened up possibilities for me creatively, being in these three different programs, and I aced the programs. And my advisor said, look, you can get the GI Bill. I can transfer you from here to Berklee College of Music in the jazz program, or I can get you into Brown University in the writing program. So I thought to myself, and I thought, well, writing is a solitary kind of
it's exactly like a desk job.
Solitary, yeah. And I said, I really want to be in music, and I want to be with people, and I want to perform and enjoy the interplay with the audience and everything. So I went to Berklee, and I couldn't read too well music, and but my improvisation was spot on,
right? And
that's how I got in. And
so
I was accepted and got in. And I went for 5 semesters, and a young man was in a practice room playing piano. It was late at night, and I commuted an hour by bus on the last bus of the evening to go a whole hour to where I lived, because I couldn't get an affordable place in Boston at the time. So I was a roommate in a big house with a couple of students who were going to law school. And I would travel on the bus. I'd get the last bus, and I'd be in the back of the bus playing my saxophone.
Right,
practicing, because there was no one on the bus. The bus driver enjoyed it. And I'd be standing in the middle of the bus. It was an old bus, and it was, so I'd be in the back just blowing my horn. So anyway, as it turned out, I'm in this practice room, and this young man's playing piano, and I stopped to listen, and I thought, wow, I'm going to try to play some licks behind this guy.
Yeah.
So I started playing, and he stopped playing. As soon as I started playing again, he started up again. So the next thing I know was we're playing. Next thing I know, he's looking in the little window of my practice room, and he's knocking on the door, and he introduces himself to me, and he said, I've been listening to you. I'm a freshman at Berklee, and he was like an 18-year-old kid. And he was also a visual artist, I came to find out, a painter. He had paint smeared. He had, he looked like a real artist. He had holes in his jeans and paint smeared
Paint
all over
everywhere.
himself.
Yeah.
A real creative, cool young man, you know. So I started, you know, playing music with him regularly in the practice rooms. And one day, on a Sunday, he called me up and said, hey, how would you like a gig in Newport, Rhode Island? My parents own this restaurant. Come to find out, it's like his family was like one of the wealthiest families in Newport. And it was the Inn at Castle Hill. Beautiful, beautiful restaurant. Anyway, I had a job driving a truck and delivering newspapers on the weekends to the kids who delivered the papers. And I had just gotten back to bed. It was 10 in the morning. I'd been up since 4 delivering papers on a truck. So he said to me, and Newport was 45 minutes away by car. My sister had loaned me her car. She moved to California with a boyfriend. So I actually had a car. So he said, you got to come here. I've told these people all about you. I said, Michael, I'm pretty burnt. He said, look, I'll make it worth your while. If you come here, we'll serve you a really nice brunch before you play. So food was the way to my heart.
So, especially when you're in college.
Yeah. So I drove there, and I went into this gorgeous restaurant, into this paneled dining room with a 360 degrees view of the ocean and sailboats and everything. And I'm in there and I'm enjoying. For the first time, I'd never had eggs Benedict. So I'm having eggs Benedict with a Bloody Mary, and I'm just living the life. Yeah. Living the life. And all of a sudden, Michael comes in. He said, hey, these old ladies are waiting for you. When are you going to come and play? You know? So I said, I'll be right there. So I'd forgotten why I was there. So I quickly rinsed my mouth out and put my instrument together, went in, and we had an amazing gig. And in the audience, in the bar, was a young man who was a piano player. He was my age, it turned out. And he also was a Vietnam-era veteran. He was a helicopter pilot. And he had a jazz gig in town playing stride piano with a group. And he came over and he said, you know, I've never heard anybody play saxophone like you before. He said, I have a gig this evening at this restaurant down on the wharf. And he said, we don't have a saxophone player. Would you like to come? I said, oh, why not? And he said, look, I'll make it worth your while. Another one. Dinner. He said, I'll buy you dinner before we play at this restaurant next door. So here I went from brunch to a really nice dinner at this other restaurant. And I remember having this delicious French onion soup and other things. So I went and I performed with these guys. And in the audience was Elaine Laurillard, who with George Wein started the Newport Jazz Festival. And Elaine asked me to come up to the bar. She was a Newport socialite, the heiress to the Laurillard tobacco fortune. And she said, young man, she said, I'm really enjoying your playing. And she said, this group didn't sound half as good until you came along. She said, you should move to Newport. So, you know, I was trying to be a journeyman musician at Berklee. Right. And I felt after 5 semesters, I had enough kind of hardware so that I could go on. You know, I thought, I don't really need a degree. Yeah. So I made the decision to drop out, and I moved to Newport. And I performed in the same place for almost 10 years with a variety of different people. Uh-huh. And also I played in a whole bunch of other places all over the town, brunches. I played for the Tall Ships when Ted Turner won the America's Cup. Uh-huh. He selected our band to play on the wharf. We were on international television. So I had a wonderful time playing with all these groups. And ultimately I met a young woman there who I ended up moving to California with. We met, and that's how I ended up on the coast.
Were you in San Francisco, or did you?
Well, we originally moved to. We came here in 1984 to spend a weekend at Sea Ranch with her sister, who lived in San Francisco, and her sister's ex-boyfriend. And the sister was a painter. She's a modern abstract painter, beautiful work. And she and girlfriends would come up to the coast and rent different houses on the coast every month. So she told us about Sea Ranch. So we came and spent a weekend here. And the morning I woke up, I had my tenor with me. I woke up to this glorious morning. I put my horn together. I got on the deck. It might have been 7 in the morning. The sun had just come up, and I just started playing my heart out. And her brother-in-law, my sister's, my girlfriend's late sister and brother-in-law, kind of told me that I was going to get them in trouble because I was waking people up. He was kind of reminding me that what I was doing
is not okay.
Was not okay. And
it's like a rooster.
I put it away.
Okay, how good you sound.
I put it away, but I thought to myself, this is the most beautiful scene I've ever seen in my life. I want to live here.
Yeah.
So ultimately, we did move to California full time. We lived in Santa Rosa for 10 years, and I was in the wine business for almost 22 years. But during that time, I was active in the jazz program at the junior college at night, and I had a couple of garage bands, so I was constantly playing music.
Oh, yeah.
But eventually, Marilyn, my late girlfriend, bought a house at Sea Ranch, and after about 5 or 6 years, I was able to take my work to Sea Ranch so I could work out of the house, because originally I wasn't able to. So I rented from various places, different families in Santa Rosa. I would come up on the weekends and work on the house. So ultimately, I had the opportunity to move full time. However, they had dial-up on Sea Ranch.
I remember dial-up.
Which was the death knell for the business, because it wasn't user-friendly to be able to do the business.
Yeah, it was challenging.
So ultimately, I moved to Sea Ranch, and ultimately Marilyn got sick, passed on from cancer, and after she passed away, I moved to Gualala, and I lived in, so I've been living here for more than a couple of decades.
More than a couple of decades, yeah.
And I've been renting a place for probably since 2013. I've been renting the same place.
Yeah.
And
I was trying to think of when we met, because I moved here in '97, and I'm trying to figure out if you were here full time at that point. Were you already here full time, or were you kind of back and forth?
I was kind of back and forth.
Because I remember you with the wine business. I remember that part of you.
And I started doing wine label design. It was kind of to satisfy my artistic bent, because I kind of got bored in the business aspect of selling wine and talking about wine. I thought, hey, I'm going to try. So I started noodling, and my noodles became ideas for wine label designs, and just opened up other possibilities for me creatively that I didn't have to just... But after Marilyn passed on, I stayed in the wine business with a couple of other wineries for about 1.5 to 2 years. And then I eventually got out of there and began playing full time.
Yeah.
And started the program at the Sea Ranch Lodge in 2012. It was Sunset and Jazz with Harrison Goldberg and friends.
And it's still going on.
It's still going on.
It's still going on. I've come out and seen you a few times, and I think it's happening. It's always the fourth Thursday.
It was, they went to the second and fourth Thursday of every month.
Yeah.
And if you recall, you and I talked about this. I knew you had your poetry thing.
Third Thursday.
And I didn't want to, originally I had the third Thursday, and
we switched it up.
I wanted you to have,
that was nice.
To get people without having a scheduling conflict with me.
Exactly.
So you grabbed the third, and I grabbed which was originally I think it was the fourth Thursday. Then they added it on to second and fourth. And I think now they've scaled it back. It might be just one a month.
I think it's just the fourth Thursday.
But I was happy to have, at the point when it happened, I was happy to have 2 gigs a month.
Yeah, and it's a nice gig, because in the Fireside Lounge, everyone really pays attention. Yes. People are there to listen. It's not, we're here to hang out and be cool. No, we want to listen to what's happening.
Yes.
And it's nice to be in an environment like that, where everyone's just kind of leaned back in the fireplace and just holding that space, which you're so good at. Well, you're so fun to listen to.
I was going to tell you that most of what I did at those gigs were just jazz standards. I didn't do any kind of improvisational, intuitive music. And most of my recorded career, which includes more than 22 albums, there isn't one album of jazz standards.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. It's all intuitive and improvisational music with more than 8 different bands.
Yeah.
But my meat and potatoes, how I made my living at the lodge, was playing jazz standards. All the classic 30s and 40s tunes.
Right.
And
Right.
that's kind of where what I showcase. And the audience loved those tunes, by the way. They love those standards. And you had an older audience that loved Broadway show tunes. And I played what the audience really wanted at that time.
Is there a Pacific Woods song that we can play right now just to kind of give listeners a feeling? I've got the Pacific Woods LP pulled up. How about Echoes from a Cave?
Why don't we
Echoes
do
in a
Echoes?
Cave?
Yeah,
Is that
Echoes
song?
from a Cave.
That feels good to me too.
Yeah.
This is Echoes in a Cave.
I'm playing tenor on this one.
Okay.
And I've always had a fascination with cave paintings, like in Lascaux,
Mm-hmm.
and the paintings in these caves in southern France and Spain. And this was kind of my homage to cave painting and petroglyphs in caves.
And
my musical homage to that.
And you're with Dave Jordan on this, right?
Dave Jordan on electric bass, and he produced all the music that we did.
All right, let's listen up. Yes, indeed. That was beautiful. Echoes in a Cave. Let's go. um, so Harrison is not just, I don't want to say not just, he is more than a sax player and a musician. He's also a brilliant writer. As mentioned earlier, he could have gone to Boston University for literature, and he just came out with a book. And you want to read something and talk about the book of
The name of the book is Once Upon a Tune. It's narrated by Forrest Tune, and Forrest Tune was inspired by my friend Jim Kingsby, an African-American man whom I met at Berklee College of Music, We were both on the GI Bill. We were both 30-year-old freshmen. And Jim became sort of a mentor to me. And he was also an aspiring saxophonist. But in my book, Once Upon a Tune, One Young Man's Quest to Become a Jazz Saxophonist, the character based on Jim Kingsby plays upright bass. And the young Caucasian friend of his that's based on myself plays the saxophone. So anyway, basically what I want to tell you is the story that I've crafted is a jazz music metaphor, a loving and living manifesto of inclusiveness that I've lived by and championed throughout my whole life. Namely, that all persons, regardless of race, creed, color, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or religious preference, are all deserving of love, kindness, and respect, and should therefore be afforded every opportunity to make a significant creative contribution to the well-being of their respective global communities.
And one more time, I want to remind you that you're listening to Be More Now right here on KZWX. I'm speaking with jazz poet, saxophonist, writer, amazing artist, Harrison Goldberg.
My tale was inspired by the jazz music scene in which I came of age while learning to play the tenor saxophone in my hometown of New Bedford, Massachusetts. Multicultural New Bedford from the mid-'60s on was a favorite performance site for many of New York City's well-known African-American jazz musicians. And my first experience playing the tenor saxophone was I snuck in, as a teenager, I snuck into an integrated jazz club, the Piccadilly Lounge. When the doorman looked the other way, I went in there and I hid underneath the table and I heard the most amazing jazz tenor saxophone player, a wizened old African-American man who became kind of the basis for the mentor in my book, Dr. Sax. And Dr. Sax is based on the Bay Area, late Bay Area jazz saxophonist Joe Henderson, who I collaborated with for 5 years. He was going to write music for this musical fable that I've been working on as an animation. And he passed away, unfortunately, before we were able to get that process going. But anyway, the story takes place in the 1960s in Harlem, New York. And I won't say any more, but the book is available at the Four-Eyed Frog. It's available at the Dolphin. It's available at the general store at the Sea Ranch Lodge. And
Once Upon a Tune.
Once Upon a Tune.
By Harrison Goldberg. Yes. It's full of
become
artwork and
jazz
quotes.
saxophonist.
It's a beautiful book. Also doing a lot of jazz poetry. Do you want to share something, or
Sure.
is that where you were going?
I can share something with you. Probably another time I could read an excerpt from the book about mentorship, which is one of my favorite sections, how this mentor helped the young white musician get what he needed to find soul within himself and come back on the scene maybe 12 years later and really have something to say.
Yeah.
But I'd like to share with you a poem that I wrote.
That sounds great.
And I know Blake and I are talking about doing a segment where we both go back and forth doing some jazz poetry.
That sounds so fun.
I know, Blake, you did an amazing poem on, I'll never forget it. You did a poem about John Coltrane that I just thought was extraordinary.
Yeah,
And
that was an epic poem.
that was epic.
Yeah. It was a San Francisco quartet. I think I read that with them in the background. And we didn't practice. It was that same sort of school of improv where, we just did it. And it was such a blessing.
Okay, I'm going to select a poem.
Okay.
This is a poem that I wrote a long, long time ago, 1992. I wrote this poem about my experience playing music in Newport, Rhode Island, where I performed in the same place, the Clark Cook House. It was an old 200-year-old building that they moved down to the wharf. It became a real trendy, fashionable place where all the hip, young, wealthy people hung out, and all the yachtsmen who came to Newport for the America's Cup and the tall ships. It was a scene. It was a happening. Blake, you would have been right in the middle of this, dancing up the storm.
Dancing away, yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to read you this poem. It seems to be a favorite when I do read it. It's called Horn Man by the Sea. Clubs empty out. Partiers spill onto cobblestones. No palm trees in old Newport town. Just some street lamps a swaying and the sweeper man a waving, brushing pavement. His machine a saying, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Taxi driver slouched in his seat, cigarette dangling, blues on the radio signaling the farewell hour. Feels so cool being in the street. After the gig, people stroll by and the moon stares down with a yellow eye. Seems I climbed a mountain so very high. Did so well, did so good. Played my sax best I could. Made some folks smile. Those rich ones up on the avenue don't care. They don't even know I'm there. We left together, the piano man and me. We parted company at the wall where drugs are dealt and stares are felt. Offers of breakfast I refuse. Hell, my heart's played out. Greasy eggs and bacon won't satisfy a hunger too deep inside. Sax man coming, sax man going, lugging my heart in my case, which ain't getting no lighter. 'Cause when daybreak comes, you ain't no star. They're up there in the sky where they belong, and you're here in the ground. Mannequins catch my eye in a lighted store window. Dressed to kill, no place to go. Out in the street, it's men hustling women. Seems that's all they know. And me, I'm moving on down to my next gig, hoping a face in the crowd will hear the horn and feel my heart within. Now it's a song by the sea, a drunkard's chant that wails like seagulls over the cry of the street. Winds whistle, halyards slap against naked masts. Oh, when the fuzzy blues of fog rolls in, a lone horn bleats, lovers embrace in the street, and the sax man, hard a-breaking, fades from shadow into night. Sax man coming, sax man going, lugging my heart in my case, which ain't getting no lighter. 'Cause when daybreak comes, you ain't no star. They're up there in the sky where they belong, and you're here, down here on the ground.
Snapping my fingers for that. Nice. Thank you. Sax man coming.
Sax man gone. Lugging my heart in my case.
He's not coming, he's gone.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's really fun. Yeah, you can really feel that essence of, it's so true. You're the player at night and everyone's got, and then you're done. You know, I always say musicians get paid for lugging the instruments.
Sure.
The joy is that time. What you gonna do for us, Harrison?
Well, I'd like to do this is a stream of conscious piece that I wrote. It's called Fermata, Fermata. To those who are savvy about music theory, it's the symbol of a fermata is sort of like an eyebrow with a dot in the middle. It's considered to be the hold symbol in music. So if you see the fermata over a measure of music, that means one would hold that piece. So it's a hold fermata, and that's what I'm calling this particular piece. Forever. Is it a place where we go when all this is over? Or is it a state of suspension where one's spirit can float on the many faceted dreams that rise up like so many lost Atlantises from the islands of a man's lifetime? This destinationless voyage takes us around and around, visiting all those lands of joy and sadness, despair and triumph, all those discoveries and losses peopled with the ghosts of those we've cherished and loved, and the others, the unspeakable ones. Those are embarrassments and humiliation. It's all but a brief sustained heart song of forever lingering notes from a once resplendent melody, reverberating, rejoicing, resounding through the cobwebbed catacombs of time and memory. Sometimes it is better when all is not said, the notes are not all played. Some are left out. Better to imagine you with me, a carafe of ruby wine and a red checkered tablecloth set before us. Yours a dancing smile, all castanets, stomping boots on stone pavers, the infectious, insistent flamenco guitar, a flash of red, the billowing skirt. I disappear into your eyes. Sometimes it is better only to remember wet kisses, shells, stones and driftwood you gather by the sea, the delight of your laughter, the sweet sandalwood scent of you. Sometimes it is better to imagine all this.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Yeah,
Blake.
yeah. I like that. I mean, it's a stream of consciousness, just that I felt like it was a meandering flow, but it wasn't Dada-like. It made a lot of sense.
Would you like me to do one more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
This one's called Drugstore Cowboys and Wallflowers. Was that really me so many years ago, coming of age in 1960s New England? This grandson of Russian Jewish immigrants trying to fit into a Christian-oriented world? After dinner, my crew-cut self, hanging on a drugstore corner in tribal khakis, barracuda jacket, and blue two-tone suede shoes. Homework avoided, testosterone-driven, watching all the girls go by, drooling over those MGs, Triumphs, Austin Healey's, and Corvettes. These the spoils of some entitled classmates. The flowing blonde hair of their co-ed trophy passengers trailing like shooting stars in their muffler-arrogant wake. Making the scene at Friday night sock hop YMCA dances, heavy on 50s tearjerker bumpin' grinders, or 50s rock around the clock honkin' sax dripping with three-part vocal harmonies. Here I'm invisible, fantasizing of budding romances, dreams, so many never to be fulfilled. Those belong to three-letter jocks or hip biker dudes with Brill-Cream DAs. Darling, let me prove my love to you, croons the salty-tiered lovesick mantra of my wild and unfulfilled desires, tasted so long ago in the flower of my youth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great. Well, Harrison, it's been such a pleasure talking with you and your brilliant self. It's really an honor to have this time with you. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm honored
with
to
me.
be here, Blake, and I will turn it right back to you and say your brilliant creative self, too. And thank you, and I look forward to the next opportunity when we can maybe recite poetry back and forth together, sort of like a little mini slam.
Yeah, let's do it. Maybe we'll put some of your music in the background and
Sounds great.
we'll do that.
Blake.
I'm gonna take us out with Remembrance and also from Pacific Woods. Here we go. Wow, what a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed listening to the ever-creative, musical, and expressive Harrison Goldberg's rich tapestry of tales as much as I did. If you want to know more about him, check out his artworks, listen to more of his music, discover his book, or bask in his peaceful interludes, you can visit his website, harrisongoldbergarts.com, and that's GOLDBERGARTS.com. I want to make a couple of announcements. This Monday, as well as every other Monday, unless otherwise noted, the nonprofit organization, the Mendocino Coast Jazz Society, hosts its weekly Monday Jazz Jam from 6 to 9 p.m. at Tall Guy Brewing, 362 North Franklin Street in Fort Bragg. There's also a swing dance lesson at 5 p.m., and the organizers say it's open to all and suggest that folks bring their axes, voices, dancing shoes, or just their ears. And another topic that's near to my heart is the Don't Panic, Eat Organic exhibit at the Kelly House Museum in downtown Mendocino. And they're celebrating 50 years of Corners of the Mouth, Mendocino's legendary worker-owned natural food store. What started as a food buying club in 1975, serving the counterculture and back to landers, has evolved into a beloved hub of local community. Learn about the origins of the Baptist church that houses the store, admire the artistry of original hand-drawn posters and recipes, and view photos of the collective's members from the past 5 decades. The exhibit will be up at the Kelly House Museum through June 2nd, 2025. Well, all right, that wraps up my show. Be More Now. This is Blake Moore. I want you to stay tuned for the Treehouse with W. Dan, and have a beautiful rest of your evening and a great day tomorrow. And as always, keep that heart open and be kind to yourself and to each other. It's time for us to really remember to stay peaceful and loving. Have a great night.